A Mochi moment from Mark, who writes, I just want to thank you for making GLP-1s affordable. What would have been over $1,000 a month is just $99 a month with Mochi. Money shouldn't be a barrier to healthy weight. 3 months in, and I have smaller jeans and a bigger wallet. You're the best. Thanks, Mark. I'm Myra Ahmed, founder of Mochi Health. To find your Mochi moment, visit joinmochi.com.
Mark is a Mochi member compensated for his story.
Monday Sidekick, the AI agent that knows you and your business, thinks ahead and takes action. Ask it anything. Seriously. Monday Sidekick, AI you'll love to use. Start a free trial today on monday.com.
All right. So we're back with Ken and Mike. Cindy is on a deadline, so she won't be joining us today. But real interesting stuff happening with Alcatraz, and lots of good stuff happening, as we were telling you. And Ken, we were talking earlier, well, via text. This is going to get posted tomorrow, so sorry. Normally post on Thursdays, but we had a little scheduling conflict, so bear with us. And we were talking earlier on text about Ken's family, who actually lived, some family members who lived actually in the California area or on the West Coast during the escape, around the time of the escape. And I think we touched on this a little bit when we were going down the rabbit hole of the beat by beat escape, and when they got out and who was waiting for them and who positioned cars and planes and stuff like that. But Ken actually found some surprising information that even surprised him.
He did.
So let's talk about that today and dive right in. So Ken, let's re-rack it for people and kind of get them up to speed and let the listeners know a little bit more about your family on the West Coast and how did they get there? Because almost all of them lived on the East Coast in Florida, and I know Uncle Man. I know he lived in Texas for a little bit, but majority of the people were in like Florida, Georgia, right?
Well, yeah. So I think we kind of covered this before. My grandparents and my aunts and uncles, including my mom, they grew up extremely poor. I mean, you think of poor today, it's not even close to what they went through. And so to even believe that, there were someone actually living in California would be just a shock. In fact, I didn't even know that we had any of the family members in California until I was working with Art Roderick. And Art said, you had an aunt that was in California during the time of the escape. And we were like, I didn't even know that.
How did he find out?
That's how far off we were from the story about what was going on. Uncle Man never told anyone that, that he had asked the younger sisters to be a part of this. So let's kind of wind back a little bit. So,
let's think back.
14.
Well, I just want you to answer one question. How did that come up with Art? Number one, and how did he know?
Well, so let's back up a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So the family, of course, is made up of 7 brothers and 7 sisters. The last 2 sisters to be born in this family, one was named Aunt Patsy or Patsy. That's her name. And then the last, which is the baby girl, is named Nell. Now, you can actually hear these 2 individuals on the tape, the Breezy tape. You can actually hear them, they're actually on that tape. And so, like I said, I never kind of knew that anybody from the family was ever involved. And only because they were so poor, I couldn't even imagine how they could afford to even get over there. And so the way we kind of found out was when I was talking to Art during the the shooting of the Alcatraz Search for the Truth back in 2015, Art told me one time, he said, you had family members that's listed in the FBI report as being in California. And I was like,
Okay.
kidding me? He was like, oh yeah, they're in there. And so I was like, I just really couldn't believe that. And so I went and actually read the FBI report, and there is a section in there where they interviewed one of the sisters. They never listed her by name because her name was redacted because she wasn't dead at the time. And her and her to-be, and this is the interesting thing, her and her to-be husband, she wasn't even married to him yet, was out in California. And she is the same sister that took my grandmother to visit John and Clarence when they were in Leavenworth. She took my grandmother, they got on a Greyhound bus and they drove or took the bus, and it was like multiple days to get out to see them. Mm-hmm. Last time my grandmother ever saw John and Clarence alive that we know of, And so she and her to-be husband, his name was Floyd Stevens, who, believe it or not, was a guy that John and Clarence did time with in Rayford Prison. And believe it or not, my grandmother actually wrote his letter to the warden when he was up for parole. And this is what got him out on parole. And in one of the letters that Clarence writes to my grandmother in like January of 1962, he even references Floyd in this letter. Mm-hmm. He says, I'm glad Floyd is out of prison. I'm glad you helped him. And what is he up to now? So he's even referencing him. So we know that my one of my youngest aunt, Aunt Nell, and Floyd, who becomes her husband later on, is out in California. They supposedly went out there to they're migrant workers. They went out there to pick fruit, pick oranges and whatever else was in season at the time. But none of the family members knew that they were out there. The only people that knew that they were out there were the FBI. The authorities, because they later questioned them. The weird thing is that whenever my grandmother writes the very last letter that she's writing to Clarence, which she, believe it or not, she writes it on January the 11th, 1962, the day of
June the 11th.
June. And, June. Yeah, June the 11th. Well, I say June the 11th, 1962. She mails it. It gets dated. It gets out there, several days later. Of course, Clarence is already gone. And in the letter, she's talking about Nell marrying this other man, that they were having a wedding at the house, and Nell was going to be marrying this guy, which was a Green. His last name was Green. And I'm like going, okay, wait a minute. She's out there with another man who spent time with John and Clarence in another prison, and she's coming back just like a week later, and she's marrying a totally different man, which she doesn't stay married to him that long, because like I said, I remember when she marries Floyd Stevens, and he was. So
wait a minute, let me back up because I'm a little confused here. So the guy that she was out in California wasn't Floyd?
No, that was Floyd.
That was Floyd.
He was coming back to Ruskin to marry another man.
So she was coming back to Ruskin. So she was with Floyd in California.
Yes.
Okay. And she was dating him.
And she was not dating him. She was out there with him.
Okay.
She was out there with him.
Got it. Now I get it. So now I see the thing. Okay. Now yes. I see.
So, Mike's seen this letter. Mike can verify. She's coming back a week later to marry a totally different man. Later on in life, she marries Floyd. She eventually marries this man. Mm-hmm. But she's out in California with a man that she's not fixing to marry. Why is she out there with this man? This is the man who who knew John and Clarence, who had been in prison with them. Their mom had written the letter vouching for his pardon. He gets pardoned out of prison.
Do you know what time frame that was? What time frame that was? He gets pardoned?
That was January of 1962.
Oh, so he got pardoned.
We have a letter that's dated where she did this.
Okay, so that's just before.
This is just before the escape. So, come June of 1962, her Aunt Nell and her to-be husband at some point in time in the future are now in California.
Got it.
They're only out there, and as soon as the escape occurs, they move back to Ruskin.
And then she marries. Then she goes with someone else.
And she marries someone totally else.
Yeah,
Right.
well, we have the information. June 11th is when they escape, which was it was a Monday. It was a Monday. And next Saturday, June the 16th, is when she gets married.
That's right.
So she has 5 days to get back to Florida, and so obviously it's documented she married him on June. So
Sounds like a cover story.
why are they there, and then why do they hightail it back right after the escape? Because they have to hustle to get back to Florida by car. It's going to take 4 or 5 days to do it. I mean, they barely make it. So the question is, what are they doing, and why do they have to leave so quickly right after? Well, the implication is their work is done.
Right.
They did what they needed to do to assist in the escape. They were sort of like, in the military, you have your forward people kind of taking care of things. So when the troops come in, they're good to go.
So
They were prepping. They were assisting.
Interesting. My question is that when Floyd was in, what prison was Floyd in that he got pardoned from? Was that Rayford?
He was in Rayford.
He was in Rayford. And how long was he in Rayford at that time?
He had been in there for a few years. I'm not sure exactly the crime that he had gone to prison for. Mm-hmm. More likely it was stealing. I mean, most of the people that John and Clarence hung around with, which was Floyd Stevens, he was one of their running buddies. They were either in prison for robbing something local or stealing something. So, I mean, it wasn't like a major crime where he got, he was in there for like 15, 20 years. I mean, he was in there for a few years. And usually back then, if you kept your nose clean, you had a good report from someone, a couple of years, and you were out of prison. So my other question is there any correspondence between Floyd and the brothers when he's in Rayford and they're in Alcatraz? If we had the letters that were in John and Clarence's cell, which I'm trying to get a hold of, it's very possible that there are letters from him.
Not that they would probably be discussing anything in those letters, but it would be interesting to see if they are at least communicating.
Well, like I said, we do have a letter from Clarence that he writes his mom in January, and he references Floyd. He talks about him getting out of prison. In fact, I think he even asked his mom, is undoubtedly Floyd must have played some instrument, maybe a guitar, like Clarence did. Maybe that's the reason why they bonded. Because I remember him asking, does Floyd still play? In the letter that he's writing his mom. So there was a connection there. And again, the younger sister of John and Clarence winds up in the end marrying this man. Mm-hmm. So they're out in California. The authorities realized after the escape that they were there, and they questioned her about being out there. I think it's even in a newspaper article that I found where some reporter had learned of this and wrote about one of the sisters being in California during the time of the escape. I never knew that. I never heard my mom talk about it. I never heard anybody in my family talk about it until I heard Art Roderick.
And then what does the report say? Does it just say that they were there and they were questioned?
It does say that it gives, when it talks about the sister, it talks about the address of them living in California, which was a town just south of San Francisco. So they were not in the actual San Francisco area, but they were in a town, a farming community just below San Francisco. Wow. It would be later on when Uncle Man was giving an interview with that skip tracer that we had on one time. Mm-hmm. Uncle Man even said then that there were family members out in California that the authorities didn't know about. And when he said that, I was like, okay, well, now that matches up with what Art's saying. Okay. It's now matching up to what the FBI is saying, but it doesn't match up with how did no one know that they were out there, because the FBI knew about it because they interviewed them. Mm-hmm.
Well, I have the in the book, we do have a part of the interview that Ken's Uncle Man did with Frank Ahern, and the interview was done in 2007 because he was doing Frank Ahern was trying to do a TV series about finding missing people. That's why he was in contact with Ken's uncle.
He was contracted by the production company, wasn't he?
I think he was doing it on his own and then trying to sell it to a production company.
Got it.
Kind of like creating his own show.
Working with Art.
Yeah. Anyway, it says during the course of the interview, a friend of Robert had something interesting to say. This is Frank Ahern. And quote, he told us what most people do not know is that one of the Anglin siblings was out in California during the escape and not far from the rock, information not in the FBI file. So that was a quote directly from Ken's Uncle Man to Frank Ahern.
But it wasn't. So it was in the FBI file, though.
Well, he said it was not in the FBI file, according to his Uncle Man.
We didn't find this out though until later. So there was more than one sister out there.
Got it.
That's where I couldn't understand. Okay, because I knew, like you said, I knew that it was in the FBI report. Even Art doesn't know this. If Art listens to this, he'll probably say, well, I didn't know this.
So you never told him then? When did you find this out? When did you find this out?
I found it in a letter that Clarence wrote his mom. Actually, it wasn't Clarence. I back that up. It was Alfred who wrote his mom. And Alfred is the one who mentions this. And when he mentions this other sister, I was like, So I was like, I contacted my mom to get more information about this sister. So the last two sisters that were born, one was named Patsy and the other was Nell. Nell was the youngest. She's the one who the FBI knew was out there with Floyd Stevens. Mm-hmm. I was reading one of the letters from Alfred, and he said, I wish Patsy and Bud, who she was married to at the time, that was her husband. Mm-hmm. I was glad. I'm glad that they moved back from California to Ruskin. He's talking to his mom. And I was like, wait a minute. I thought there was only one sister that was in California. And so I contacted my mom. And I was like, after I read it, and I was like, I didn't know that Aunt Patsy and her husband, he died like in the late 60s. So they all had a really rough kind of lifestyle. So if I told you how he died, you probably wouldn't even believe it. But,
well, just tell me. You can't tease me now.
According to my mom, he loved to drink moonshine. He drank some moonshine one night that ruptured his heart, and he had a heart attack and died.
Wow, some strong stuff.
He was a very heavy drinker. But so when I'm talking to my mom, and I'm like going, okay, so tell me about Aunt Patsy and Uncle Bud. And so she was like, oh, yeah, they went out to California for a short time. They were only out there for a couple of months, and they were out there during the time of the escape. I'm like, really? I said, but I thought it was only at Nell who was out there. She goes, no, I'm pretty sure she was out there. And now we have a letter from Alfred that's backing this up. So I started like doing some research. I was like, well, what did Aunt Patsy and Bud do for a living? Because I knew Nell, my Aunt Nell, they were migrant workers. They picked fruit and stuff like that. But my Aunt Patsy didn't. She was not into the farming.
Mm-hmm.
And so I asked my mom, I said, well, what did they do? And she said, well, your Uncle Bud worked on a large fishing boat. I was like, what? Why am I just now hearing this? And she was like, oh, yeah, he would go out for months at a time, out in either Alaska or California. And he would be out on boats for, like months at a time. You're doing that fishing stuff that they do that you see on TV today.
Yeah. Deadliest Catch.
And I'm like going, wait a minute. The boat that picked them up in the bay that night was a fishing boat. And I'm like going, I've got an uncle who was out there who knew how to operate a large fishing boat. And he just happens to be out there during the night of the escape. And he knows how to operate a fishing boat. And a fishing boat is what Officer Chechi said he saw that night in the bay. I'm actually believing that my uncle was the one who was driving that fishing boat. I mean, if you stop and think about it, if you were someone like Mickey Cohen who was going to give money or was going to finance this escape, my Uncle Man is the one who's putting these things together. He had Fred Breezy to fly them out of the country, but you also had to have someone to pick them up in the water. You couldn't just trust that to anybody. So here I have two uncles, one was an uncle, but one was a future uncle. And two aunts that were out in California that the authorities knew nothing about that second uncle and aunt. Hey, if you ask Art today, he would. It's not listed in the FBI reports anywhere that other aunt and uncle was out in California during that time frame.
What do you think about that, Mike?
Well, we were able, actually, when I say we, Ken was able to find a document. Now it's sort of closed in, so we don't have the whole thing, but it does list them, his Aunt Patsy living in Hollister at the time. So there is, and I don't know where Ken got it, but he did find something. It's a listing of all the different siblings.
Is that just south of San Francisco?
Where they're living, and it says that they're in Hollister, south of San Jose. It's a farming community. It's probably about an hour from San Jose south. So it's near Monterey on kind of a coastal area.
Got it.
So if he was doing fishing, you'd live. That's one of the places you could live. They had fishing there. So we do have a document that does corroborate them there, at least for a time. It's very intriguing. Again, these things lining up, because you have, like Ken said, his Uncle Man was the go-between.
He was the architect. It sounds like.
He was arranging different things, and he's not a person of interest to anybody, so he can do it very quietly, and nobody's going to say anything. Whereas Cohen couldn't do much because he was, in the midst of his trial and his trying to get his convictions overturned for the tax evasion trial that he faced, that when he was out on bond. So he had to keep a low profile, but Uncle Man could do whatever he wanted. Nobody was watching him. And so he's communicating with people. He's setting things up, probably making phone calls from Florida to California to coordinate everything that was happening. And you have key people in place who are making this happen. And one of the things about Chechi is that, his big concern was, we can try and if we can find the boat, then we can possibly find them, the escapees. And of course, the FBI, we talked about this before, dragging their feet, not really following up on this lead until he does the interview with the Oakland Tribune a few days after the escape and sort of exposes their lethargy, the FBI's lethargy. And then they start going around the bay, looking at different places where boats are docked. Well, of course, the boat's gone at this point.
Yeah.
And it's never found. It's because too much time has passed, and that boat could have been any. And if it's just an ordinary fishing boat, it could be docked anywhere, and you'd not know that was the one that was used, because on the West Coast, especially in the Monterey area, fishing is very, very a very prominent industry. You even have in the like I said, in the Monterey area, you have the old Cannery Row that Steinbeck wrote about.
Yep.
And that was that's where they processed all the fishing that they did on the coast there. So you had a lot of fishing boats, and you can easily blend in and never to be found again as part of the escape.
Well, and if you're coming out of Half Moon Bay, and that's where your boat's docked at, you needed someone to pick them up out of the water and transport them back to that area. They've got a brother-in-law now who knows how to operate a fishing boat, undoubtedly knows how to drive one. So now you've got someone who can pick them up out of the water. Then once you get to the actual dock, you need someone to transport them, which is just right down the road, to an airport that is unmanned, still there today. That's where your other future brother-in-law comes into play. Transports them down to the airport, which now you got Fred Breezy who's waiting for them. They get on an airplane, and within a matter of maybe an hour, they're in the air.
Yeah.
And within, the next morning, they're in Mexico.
Yeah.
So it's like all of these players are not people that are like famous type people that Mickey Cohen would have hired. These are people that, were hired or at least set up by Uncle Man.
All people they could trust. All people they could trust.
Yeah, people that you could trust. I mean, even Uncle Man even tells Alfred, when he's in Atlanta, this is documented in the FBI report, that Mickey Cohen set them up with a contract. So he basically financed it. Because like I said, again, the England family did not have the resources nor the means to do any of this on their own. Unless someone came and said, hey, I'll finance everything that you do, but you've got to do it. You got to put your people in place. And, they had a brother-in-law who could do a boat. We know there was a boat involved. You have another brother who would transport them to the airport. We know there was a plane involved. And you have someone flying them down to a farm in Mexico that no one would have known was there, that had to be related to Mickey Cohen.
Mm-hmm.
No one in the England family, I can tell you, owned a farm in Mexico. Nobody.
Nope.
So it had to be a farm that they knew, and it had to be somewhere that whoever was flying them there had been there before. This would not have been his first time there. Otherwise, like I said, you don't just fly into Mexico and go, okay, where are we going to land? You undoubtedly, this flight path that whatever they were on, stopping to get gas, had been done before. This is not the first time that it had been done.
Yeah.
And for the boat, the night of the escape, like Ken said, they go down to Half Moon Bay, which is a couple hours from Alcatraz by boat. Fred Breezy's waiting for him at the airport. That's still there. There's no tower there, so you can fly in and out. No one would know you're there. There's no record anywhere because it's a small little private plane airport. They get dropped off. Fred Breezy flies them out of there, and so then the boat just keeps going south. It just goes down south along the coast of California. It's a fishing boat. It's not going to draw any attention because there's other fishing boats there, and you just go down to Monterey, that area, because Hollister is a little bit inland from the Monterey Bay area. It's not too far. And you can just blend in where you just go to your dock, and, nobody would be the wiser, because at the time the authorities were not aware of any boats being involved except for Chechi. He was the only one that saw it. And like we said, the FBI didn't really act on it. So by the time they were going to try to look for it, they were looking in the bay. They weren't looking outside the bay. They weren't going further south. So And there'd be nothing about the boat that would indicate it was used in the escape, even if they somehow knew about it. If they were looking in the Monterey area, there's nothing there to say, hey, this boat was used in the escape. It's just a fishing boat.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's easy to get away, and nobody knows anything. And of course, the family's not going to talk. And there were probably Cohen's people also on the boat, probably helping out with the escape, making sure they got their stuff. Because we talked about how they had fake IDs, money, clothes. So Cohen's people were probably there to help out in case anything happened. They were there to assist. And then they get off the boat and they go off and do their, Cohen business after that.
Yeah. My question is that, so the FBI was being pretty, as you were saying, Mike, lethargic in their search up until the Officer Chechi article was published, correct?
Yes.
So my theory is that they were being lethargic because they didn't want to find him.
No. Nope.
So, but because of the article, that kind of forced their hand.
I'd said that from the very beginning. If it had not been for the newspaper article, we never would have learned about Officer Chechi. We never would have learned about the boat and what he saw. And none of that would have been ever made public because it's not in any FBI file anywhere. If Officer Chechi had not gone to the newspaper and told his story, we never would have known about it.
And then the ants, you said they were there, but they both were there in 1992 when Breezy showed up during the recording?
Yes.
So they were best there. Okay. So, and this is when you were kind of just still kind of checked out about the whole thing, correct? You were just kind of, this was family lore, you weren't even sure of, I don't know what your state of mind was at that point, but
I had done an interview with a local newspaper like in 92, maybe it was 91, right before,
Taking on a DIY job around the house is the ultimate summer project. But if your DIY home security system is a beware of dog sign, when your real pet is Princess the cat, that's safe-ish. To be actually safe, help protect your home with a DIY system from ADT. It's easy to install and gives you virtual assistance from ADT's technical support team. Best of all, you can tell everyone in the neighborhood you set it up yourself. Don't settle for safe-ish this summer. DIY with ADT instead. Visit ADT.com to learn more.
Right before Fred Breezy came and met with the family.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of getting more interested in the escape piece of it and what my uncles had done. But I didn't know. I really wish I had gone to the meeting with Fred Breezy. I was invited and I didn't go. I wish I could go back now and and be able to question him.
Come on.
But the whole thing is that there were so many different pieces of this story that the authorities just refused to record down. The boat with Officer Chechi, the finding of the raft with Cliff Fish.
Yep.
All of these items are never recorded. If they are recorded in the FBI files, they've never been released to the public.
Yeah.
And so, you just have to kind of like think about some of the, I guess, conspiracy theories that were even around like the assassination attempt with President Trump.
Yeah.
People now are sitting there going, well, why didn't this happen? Or why didn't they do this? And so you get these conspiracy theories going because they don't divulge all of the information.
Yeah.
And so the same thing is happening and could be happening here. It's just that we're finding some of this information in newspapers. We're finding in them in stories from family members. And you go, well, why isn't the FBI recording this? And you just have to speculate, okay, is there a reason why they didn't record it? Or why they're not releasing it?
Well, we can. I mean, it could be two things. It could be that they're hiding stuff, or they're just inefficient, and it's just a bureaucracy that just kind of is eating itself. Because that happens sometimes. I mean, I've been, I was embedded with, after 9/11, I was embedded with the military, the 26 MU, and went over to the Middle East. And when you start seeing the machine from the inside out, and seeing all the personalities and they're humans. They make mistake, and everybody has a different agenda. Even during a wartime, where the stakes are very high, and you see how things slip up, and you see how things slip through the cracks, and then they slip through the cracks, and then they discover that it slipped through the cracks, and then they have to it's like almost like it's a hole in your drywall, and they immediately all they want to do is patch it up, make it look exactly like there was no hole in the wall,
right?
And then forget about it. So I can see that happens. It happens in government all the time. It happens at every workplace, where things happen, and we're fallible. We're humans. It's human error. So it could be a combination of both. And that's, because based upon, because we deal with these cold cases all the time, and we have 2 or 3 of them that we're dealing right now. And so much of it, and, we're so pro law enforcement, but most of it hinges on just them not going the 10 yards to get the first down, to get the information that they really need. A lot of it has to do with them overlooking things and not seeing it, and stuff that's right underneath their nose, and until they're forced to do it. And that's one of the magic things about doing, podcasts and documentaries, and we can go back and look at these cases and we say, listen, you guys forgot this. And then they're like, and then we show it, and it's out there. It's on the podcast or on the television show. And then they got to scramble, and they go, oh, now we have to really look at it, because they're forced to look at it. And I think that was the case here, like what we talked about earlier, Mike, is that I think, if it wasn't for Officer Chechi, that was someone they ignored. And it wasn't just a person, it was a cop. So it's like now they really have to look at it. And I think that's, and so then they have to gear everything up, and they're like, they have to do a different methodology. And they're like, oh, well, they're not going to find the boat. They're not going to find the raft. They're going to do this. And so there is, then what they do is they throw all these resources towards that. And then by them doing that, they forget about something else. And they overlook something else. It's because everyone wants it done now. And a lot of it is, and depending upon who is orchestrating that and leading that investigative effort, no one's going to do anything until they're told what to do, until they're given like an order.
Yeah, I would, I agree with you.
Because you even said, because there was FBI agents that were actually doing the proper work, and then the stuff that they were coming up with, and then they were being dismissed.
And I totally agree with you, because there was a lot of times I was like, well, maybe, and Art would tell me the same thing. Well, they probably, it was a mistake. They didn't do this, or they didn't document this, but whenever I really sit down as a data analyst person that I worked for 35 years, and I looked at it and I broke it down into 3 categories, these interviews. When the FBI came in and they took over, which was probably a couple of hours after the escape was learned, because the FBI has a field office in San Francisco. They were probably over there within a matter of hours. The very first thing they do is they take photographs of the cells, which we have today. We've talked about them. The next thing they do is they start interviewing. You break those interviews down into 3 categories. They interviewed the prisoners, they interviewed the family members, and they interviewed the public. And when you get down to those 3 categories, every single person in the public, if they had any type, I thought I saw this car with 3 individuals. Mm-hmm. It was driving down the road, literally, these are in the FBI report. I saw a guy working as a bellhop in California, in New York, and he looked like John. They went and interviewed these people. They interviewed some of the silliest interviews that you could imagine. And yet they didn't document Officer Chechi, nor did they document Cliff Fish. And then you go into like the prisoners. They interview every single prisoner at Alcatraz. They go back to Leavenworth and they interview anybody who had interaction with John and Clarence. They go back to Lewisburg. They even go back to some of the state prisons that they were in. Same thing for Frank Morris. Of all of these people and the family members, they interview every single family member, relative, cousins, aunts, uncles, whatever. Why didn't they interview the one person that they should have interviewed, which was Alfred? He was both a prisoner and a family member, and they never interviewed him.
Well, you even said that Art said there was an interview.
Where is it? It is not in the FBI.
I know, but didn't he tell you that he saw it?
Art said a lot of things that I
well, and not only that, we talked about how we talked about this last week, that the inmate that tried to escape with Alfred from Kilby after Alfred's death said that the FBI came frequently many times to interview Alfred. So he corroborated the fact that he was being talked to, and yet it's not in the FBI report. The only thing in the FBI report is mostly his death and what happened in the aftermath of that, and that's it.
So I can believe what you're saying, Rob, is that, I can believe that there are some things that they maybe say they overlooked, they didn't decide to put it in there for whatever, but there are all these different cases. And when you get down to like Officer Chechi, the FBI asked him, he even told us, the FBI asked him, what can we do to make this go away? Yeah. Why in the hell would you say that to someone that was the eyewitness of an event that occurred the night of the escape?
Exactly. I agree. But and all those other things you're talking about, those things with those, they were chasing their tail and that bellhop in New York and something like that. To me, and when they do all that, to me, it's just like, it's bureaucracy just trying to show process. Yes. And showing that they're doing something, so they have a case file. So when someone comes to them who has nothing to do with the case that's above them, whether it's a new FBI director or a congressman, and say, "What have you done to find these two people?" Then they can just say, "Well, we have 10,000 files and 10,000. This is what we've done." So I think that's part of it too, and they, because we have all these volumes of stuff. And, but like you said, there's nothing in there about Alfred being interviewed at Kilby. And we know for a fact that they were in there interviewing him more than once, So,
well, and I go back to his death. Okay. The FBI files that everybody has seen that's out there today. This is about the story of the escape from Alcatraz. Why is the death of Alfred in there? What did the death of him have to do with the story of Alcatraz?
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't record my grandmother's funeral in there. They still had the case during that time.
Yep.
Nothing about her death. Why is there the death of Alfred in there? Alfred was in there because there was something related to what happened to him and the escape from Alcatraz.
Yep.
I mean, I can't even wrap my brains around why some of these things are in there and some are not in there. And I don't care what Art says. If they did an interview with Alfred, show it to me. What is the big deal about showing me an interview that they did with Alfred? If you claim that it's in there, why are you so afraid to show it to me?
Yep. Well, hopefully
they do include is, and we've talked about this before, his former cellmate from Atlanta talking about how Alfred knew they were alive and he knew where they were and he was going to reunite with them. So they included that in the report of Alfred's, private conversation.
Right.
So why put that in when not every, what do you it's in there to say Alfred was aware that they were alive and he was going to be with them once he got out. So what's in the interviews that he made with the FBI that's concerning
It's
to keep
not
it omitted?
right. I mean, the interview that they do with Alfred's cellmate, they did that after Alfred's death. So why would you go back why would you all of a sudden, you're the FBI and you go, okay, Alfred's dead. Why then would you go, well, let's go back and interview his cellmate? And when they interview his cellmate, I have tried to get this document unredacted through the Freedom of Information Act, and they refuse to give it to me. But why in the world would this individual, whoever it is, he starts off by saying, that he spent time with Alfred. Or actually, he said, I built time with Alfred in other prisons. So yeah, now he knew Alfred. But his request was, I do not want my name revealed because I fear for my life. What has his life got to do with what he's about to tell them?
He knows something. He knows something.
He says this. He goes, I don't want my name revealed because I fear for my life. And then he goes into talking about how Alfred revealed to him Uncle Man coming to visit him, telling him that his brothers were alive, they were in Mexico, and that Mickey Cohen had been the one to help them get out. All of this, he tells the FBI, and you're like going, well, where the hell is the interview with Alfred? I mean, you had the perfect person to interview. I mean, they interviewed.
Well, I don't think they would have. I don't think Alfred would have given up any information.
We don't know what he said.
Exactly. Based upon what you tell me about, and went through your mother and your family members and this.
I don't believe he would have either.
I don't think he would. I mean, especially if he's planning on getting out and going. I'm sure he drove them crazy, and they knew that he knew something.
Yeah, you're right. If they did interview Alfred and it's recorded somewhere, Alfred probably did the standard thing that most prisoners did. I had no knowledge of what was going to occur. I wasn't involved in it. He doesn't want any time added to his sentence.
Sure.
And it was a more or less, I don't know anything, but still, why is it not in the FBI files?
It just causes more questions. That's the whole thing. And I think a lot of these files and stuff that happens when you start unearthing them, because we're dealing with all these document dumps now, and all these Epstein files that have been released, and everybody's seen them, and there's still not a whole lot, and everybody knows that there's probably more, and so they're just kind of spoon feeding everybody just to keep the news cycle fed, and hopefully they'll go away. But there's really nothing, there's no there. And it's because there's no there, and either they're hiding the there or there's no there. And I think could be a combination of what this is too, that there's no there. And if there is, maybe they didn't document it at all.
I will have to say, reading the files, I at one time agreed with you. There was no there. It wasn't until, and I'm not going to say who gave it to me, but it wasn't until, and it's still in the FBI files, not unredacted, when I learned about Mickey Cohen. And that piece of information, to me, I think changed the whole story.
Yeah.
Because it was like a missing piece to a puzzle that then when I finally heard that name for the very first time, and I started doing research on him, and I started thinking about, oh my gosh, in the past, well, this makes sense as to why the brothers went to California.
Mm-hmm.
And it also makes sense as to why Clarence is driving, a car that has a California license plate, and his insurance is registered in the state of California. And no one, at the time, you never really kind of thought about how all these pieces went together.
So that was your beautiful mind moment. You started seeing all this stuff in front of you.
I'm not going, oh my gosh, my mind just started kind of opening it up to, Now, a lot of things in the past that didn't make sense all of a sudden started making sense. Like, how the hell did Clarence know about this address in Los Angeles? And they were on their way to Los Angeles. Why is John riding around with a plate on the front of his car that says Mexico? How in the heck did Uncle
And these are all
Man
photographs.
know?
These are all stuff that's substantiated by photographs.
Yes. How the heck did Uncle Man even know Mickey Cohen? Why in the heck would he have said Mickey Cohen? I mean, you're talking about a guy from Ruskin, Florida, that was a migrant worker that was as poor can be. How the hell did he know about Mickey Cohen? And why would he even say Mickey Cohen? Yeah, I mean, someone please explain that to me.
Nobody can. We're going to hopefully find out some more. But
We are going to find out.
so what I thought, I was having a visual when you were talking about your aunts. Was it Patsy and Nell?
Patsy and Nell.
That they were both at that 1992 conference with Fred Breezy. Yeah. I would have loved to have had a camera on that and been a fly in the wall when they're all sitting there, and then they're probably just sitting in the back of that's right, we knew it all the time. We knew it was going on.
I always thought there were only one family member who would have been involved. This was before I learned about Mickey Cohen and all that, and I always thought Uncle Man was the person.
Mm-hmm.
I never suspected my two aunts, never. But knowing their lifestyle, I could see where if it wasn't them, it was their husbands. Now, their husbands were very rough individuals, so to speak.
Well, yeah, they both. I mean, did both of them do time?
Both of them did time.
There you go. So
they would definitely had done prison times before. My Uncle Bud, he was a wild character. My mom, I could tell you a story that she told me about him and Patsy would be hilarious, and maybe we'll include it on our future shows.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was the kind of lifestyle they lived. So would I have even remotely believed that they could have been involved in this? Absolutely, yes. They loved John and Clarence. They loved the England family. They would have given, and you got to remember, like Floyd, my grandmother wrote the letter that got him out of prison. I mean, it's almost kind of like he owed the family something. And for him to be involved in this, absolutely yes.
Oh, yeah, a little quid pro quo there.
Yep. And for Clarence to write home to his mom in January, right after Floyd gets out of prison, and references his name really makes me, when I first read that, I was like, oh my gosh, he's asking about this individual who winds up out in the San Francisco area during the escape. So,
and I just think it's amazing based upon, the time period, because we take for granted how easily we can communicate now. Like all the methods they had, either in person, a phone, which they didn't have, which they couldn't talk to anybody by phone unless or letters. So the fact that they were able to do all of this, cloak and dagger stuff and communicate, and the timing and being there, to me, it's amazing.
Well, is it one of the reasons why the FBI refused to give the letters back that the family wrote John and Clarence? I mean, they couldn't do anything about the letters that they wrote us. We have those, but and they would have written in code. But are there any of those letters that reveal something that backs up what we're saying right now? And for whatever reason, even you heard Art say that they kept them because they were evidence. Why are those letters evidence?
Exactly.
And they still have them today.
Well, you hope they do.
Well, they undoubtedly had them in 2012 because when U.S. Marshal Dice gave me the last letter that my grandmother wrote.
The photocopy?
Which was, June the 11th. He gave me a copy of that letter. He copied it from somewhere. He didn't, it wasn't the original. He went and copied it from somewhere. So undoubtedly he has that letter. That letter showed up after they had left. So if the FBI has that letter, they have the other letters. And that is what I've been trying to work with the current administration, the past administration. I've been trying to work with, trying to write my governor. I want those letters back.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't belong to them. They belong to the family.
They do.
All of the photos, they belong to us. So, and if we get a hold of them, I really believe we will discover something in them that will be shocking. So.
Interesting. Mike, what do you have to say? How can you wrap this up for us?
Well, the thing that I find interesting is we have just these little pieces of information, but they make a very clear picture. We have we have the Frank Ahern interview talking about, he doesn't name her by name, but it's Nell and Floyd in San Francisco at that time during the escape. He's very specific about that. Mm-hmm. And then we have the other document of Patsy living in her residence was Hollister, which, like I said, it's not far from Monterey area. And he was a fishing boat guy. And we know it was a fishing boat that got him out. And then we have the Chechi, story in the newspaper, which he later corroborated many years later with ABC News, mm-hmm. a local television station, where he tells essentially the same story about what he saw all those years before. If we didn't have like one little piece, the puzzle would be incomplete. I mean, we don't have the full picture, of course. We won't have that until we get the evidence that we're seeking to absolutely prove this thing. But we have enough to paint a very compelling picture that it's a trail that leads to the escape, and it validates the escape in a very significant way that says this is evidence that's hard to dismiss. It's
reasonable doubt. Like I said, if we had 12 people in a jury and presented all this stuff, and we have more than that, we have our listeners, and every one of them that, I don't think there's one person that has commented on the boards that said that don't believe what we're presenting here. And it all lines up. It all intersects back to Alcatraz. There's not one thing that's like, okay, that takes us to a whole nother place that we can't, it's hard to fit that into the story. It all fits into the story. It all works. Fred Breezy being the pilot, Fred Breezy knowing how to extend flight in a plane where he can go from San Francisco to Mexico without having to refuel. We have that. And the planes were fast enough at that time in the early 1960s where he could make it within the time that he indicates in the interview with the family. So again, it all fits. There's nothing there that's an outlier that just we can't work with. Yeah, I mean, and you can, from San Francisco to the Mexican border, is like 3.5 hours maybe by plane? Right. Probably something like that. Yeah. Yeah. So, by the time the next morning when they discovered that they weren't there, it was 10 o'clock in the morning, according to 10 o'clock in the morning. You're outside Mexico City. Yeah. I mean, it's and the math works. The math works. Exactly. Yeah. He said they were fueling their plane up at around, I think he said, he didn't say around, he said at 10 o'clock the next morning, they were fueling their plane up when they heard the news break over the radio. And then he even corrects himself. He says, actually, it's 11 o'clock back home. So he takes into account that time change, which is daylight savings time that Mexico doesn't, observe, that California doesn't observe. He even takes that into account. It's crazy. So, oh my gosh, it's like Mike said, every bit of this piece of information all points to the same thing. Same conclusion. And that's interesting about your two aunts. Yeah, very few people know about now a lot of people know. When did they're obviously they passed on, correct? What's that? They've passed on, those aunts? Both of them, every person is dead right now except my mom. She's the only person still left alive. God bless her. God bless her.
And I would never have known that my Uncle Bud was a boat captain or worked on boats unless I had asked her. And she was just like, we were talking when I learned about my Aunt Patsy. I couldn't even remember my Uncle Bud's name because, like I said, he died in the late 60s. I was still like 10 years old.
Yeah.
9 or 10. And so when I called her, I said, Mom, tell me about Aunt Patsy. And she was telling me about all the stuff, and then she said, your Uncle Bud used to work on fishing boats. Like, what? I was like, I'm just now hearing this.
Bing.
She's like, well, I forgot about it. I was like, oh my gosh, he worked on fishing boats out in California. And it was a fishing boat, according to Officer Chechi, that picked the men up in the bay.
Boom. Boom, 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 boom.
Oh my gosh. Now all of this is starting to make more sense.
Yeah. Such a labyrinth, though, that you had to go through.
Yes. Well, like you said, back in 1962, you didn't have the internet to coordinate stuff. You didn't have cell phones. It was pretty much either through mail or you contacted someone on the old Bell South landline. Or
you got like a telegraph message.
Telegraph, right. I mean, there were no other ways to communicate with each other. So,
I know. All right, guys. Awesome stuff. All right, well, until next week, till we dig down another rabbit hole.
Yep, connecting the dots. We're connecting the dots.
All right, guys.
Okay.